Picture this. You walk into one of the most beautiful bookstores in Madrid, feeling confident, feeling alive. The kind of afternoon where everything seems to be going right for once. The light is golden through the tall windows. The smell of old paper wraps around you like a hug. And then you see her, standing between two shelves, perfectly composed, holding a book like she owns the place. So naturally, you do what any reasonable person would do. You walk straight up to her and start complaining about the store's organization. For 23 minutes, without ever once asking if she actually worked there. My name is Carlotta. I'm 26 years old. I'm from Seville. And I have a gift, a truly extraordinary, absolutely cursed gift, for turning perfectly ordinary afternoons into the kind of stories people tell at dinner parties for years. This is one of those stories. And I promise you, by the time it's over, you'll never look at a bookstore the same way again. If you love stories that make you laugh, cringe, and feel everything in between, subscribe to this channel. New stories every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. It started, as most of my disasters do, with me being absolutely certain I was right. I had taken the AVE from Seville to Madrid that Friday morning, for the kind of trip I'd been planning for 3 weeks. Not for work, not for family, but for me, Ari. A weekend alone in the city. A hotel near Malasaña. Long walks, good coffee, and at least 4 bookstores, because I am the kind of person who plans her vacations around bookstores and feels no shame about it whatsoever. The last stop on my list was Tipos Infames, a small, legendary independent bookstore near Calle Fuencarral that my friend Rocio had recommended approximately 17 times until I finally wrote it down just to make her stop. And the moment I walked in, I understood why she wouldn't shut up about it. It was everything I wanted a bookstore to be. Narrow and warm, with wooden shelves that reached the ceiling, and handwritten recommendation cards tucked beside the spines. There was a cat sleeping on a stool near the register. Orange, enormous, entirely indifferent to human presence. The kind of cat that has decided it is above the concept of customers. Jazz was playing somewhere in the back, low and unhurried. The afternoon light came in through the front window in long amber strips that turned the dust in the air into something almost beautiful. I was immediately, catastrophically at home. I spent the first 15 minutes just wandering, touching spines, reading first lines, reorganizing my priorities in the romance section, which, if I'm being honest, had been shelved in a way that made absolutely no sense to me. Alphabetical by author, yes, but completely ignoring the emotional logic of how anyone actually chooses a romance novel. You don't go in thinking, I want Ferrante today. You go in thinking, I want to feel something enormous and survive it. That's a different system entirely. I was deep in this internal debate when I turned the corner and nearly walked straight into her. She was standing in the narrow aisle between the literary fiction and the essays section, holding a book open at what looked like page 40. She wasn't reading, exactly. She was the kind of person who reads the way other people listen to music, with her whole body slightly still, like she'd pressed pause on the rest of the world. She had dark hair pulled back loosely, and she was wearing a soft gray blazer over a white shirt, open at the collar. The kind of outfit that looks effortless because it probably cost a fortune, or because the person wearing it simply has that quality, that composure, that makes everything look like it belongs. She looked like she was in charge. She looked to my Sevillana brain running on 2 coffees and 4 hours of travel, exactly like someone who worked there. "Excuse me," I said, and she looked up. Her eyes were dark and calm, and there was a half second where something flickered across her face, something I couldn't name at the time. "Can you help me with something? I'm looking for a book. I can't remember the title. I barely remember the plot. But the cover was green, and it made my friend cry on a train in 2022. She blinked once. Then, without even the smallest pause, she said, "Was it a good cry or a bad cry?" "A good cry," I said. She texted me about it. She said, and I quote, "I'm on the Renfe and I'm weeping and I don't even care who sees me." "Then it was probably literary fiction," she said. "That section is behind you. What do you remember about the story?" And just like that, we were off. Her name, though I didn't know it yet, was Isolda. She was 28 years old from Barcelona, currently living in Madrid, and she did not, in any universe or timeline, work at that bookstore. She was waiting for her girlfriend, who had gone to pick up a coffee order from the place around the corner and was running about 15 minutes late. She had simply picked up a book to pass the time, happened to look like someone who belonged in a place like that, and then made the most impulsive decision of her week. When a girl with a Sevillana accent and a completely unearned confidence asked her for help, she decided to help. Later, she told me she didn't know why. Only that something about my sincerity, the specificity of the green cover, the detail about the train, the way I said it like it was obviously enough information to work with, made her want to stay in the moment a little longer rather than explain it away. I knew none of this, of course. What I knew was that she was extremely knowledgeable about books, that she had good instincts, and that she was listening to me the way very few people actually listen, not waiting for her turn to talk, but actually in it. Present, paying attention. "The green cover," she said, walking slowly toward the literary fiction shelves. "In 2022. That's a narrow window. Do you know if it was translated from another language?" She said the writing was devastating. So probably. Norwegian? Maybe. Is that a guess, or do you actually know? She glanced at me sideways, and there was the smallest curve at the corner of her mouth. A little of both. She pulled a book from the shelf and handed it to me. I read the back cover. I read the first page. I looked up at her. "This is it," I said. "I think this is genuinely it. Then today is your lucky day." I hugged the book to my chest with the sincerity of someone who has just found something they didn't know they were missing. "You're very good at this," I told her. "Are you always this helpful, or is it just Fridays?" She paused, just briefly, and said, "I try." I should have noticed that pause. I didn't. Instead, I started telling her everything that bothered me about the organization of the romance section. The thing about talking to Isolda was that she made it feel completely natural to keep going. Most people, when you start a conversation with a stranger, give you the subtle signs, the slight lean back, the eyes that drift toward the exit, the answers that get shorter and shorter until they're basically just vowels. A polite here. That's interesting there, that means the precise opposite. I have learned, over 26 years of being someone who talks a great deal, to read these signs and adjust accordingly. Isolda gave me none of them. She listened. She responded. She engaged. When I explained my theory about the emotional logic of romance novel organization, that you should shelve them not alphabetically, but by the kind of feeling they give you. Devastating slow burns in one section, chaotic opposites attract in another, historical with actual historical accuracy in a third. She didn't look at me like I was insane. She tilted her head and said, "What section would Austen go in?" Devastating slow burn with comedic elements, and a protagonist who is smarter than everyone around her but refuses to admit it, I said immediately. So she gets her own shelf. She gets her own wall. She almost smiled. I mean, almost. It was the kind of almost smile that lives just at the edge of a person's expression, like it's waiting to see if it's safe to come out. I found myself, ridiculously, wanting to say something good enough to finish it. I walked her through my entire theory. She walked beside me through the narrow aisles as I gestured at shelves and made my case, occasionally offering a counterpoint, not to contradict me, but in the way of someone who is genuinely curious what you'll say back. She had the book she'd been reading tucked under her arm. The jazz from the back of the store had shifted to something slower. The orange cat had relocated from the stool to the top of a low bookshelf and was now watching us with the expression of someone who has seen this kind of thing before and is reserving judgment. "You should suggest this to the staff," she said at one point. "I'm telling you about it right now," I said. A pause that I now understand completely differently than I did in the moment. "Right," she said. "Yes. I'll take it under consideration." "Can you actually do that? Like, can you rearrange sections if a customer makes a compelling argument?" She looked at me for a moment. Something in her expression was doing something complicated, a kind of careful stillness, like a person standing at a crossroads deciding which direction to commit to. "I think," she said slowly, "that if the argument is compelling enough, anything is possible." I took this as genuine bookstore employee flexibility and felt encouraged. The next 20 minutes were, objectively speaking, some of the best 20 minutes I'd had in months. We talked about books the way I almost never get to talk about them. Not just, "Have you read this?" but why, what it does to you, what you carry with you after. She'd read more than I expected, had opinions that were specific and personal, disagreed with me twice in ways that made me think rather than just feel defensive. She asked about Seville. I told her about the April fair, about the heat in August, about how the city smells like orange blossom in spring, in a way that makes you feel like the air itself is trying to be kind to you. "I've never been," she said. "You should go," I told her. "Go in April. Go during the fair. Eat tortillas for breakfast and don't apologize for it." "What if I don't know anyone there?" "The whole city will adopt you in 20 minutes, I said. "That's just how it works." She was quiet for a second, and I thought I saw something soften in her expression, something genuine, unguarded, that didn't belong to the composure she'd worn since the beginning. But before I could read it properly, the door at the back of the store opened. A young man in a blue apron came through carrying a box of new stock, took one look at us, and said, cheerfully and loud enough for the whole store to hear, "Hey, can I help you find something? I see you've been here a while. I'm one of the staff if you have any questions." I froze. I turned very slowly to look at Isolde. She was already looking at me. Her expression, in that precise moment, was the most perfect combination of things I have ever seen on a human face. Apology, amusement, genuine affection, and the very specific look of someone who is about to receive consequences they were always going to receive but hoped, briefly, to delay. "You," I said very quietly, "do not work here." "No," she confirmed, equally quietly. "I do not." The silence that followed lasted approximately 1.5 seconds, and then I turned, grabbed the green book from the shelf where I'd set it down, and walked, with enormous dignity that I absolutely did not feel, in the direction of the nearest exit, which, as it turned out, was the emergency door. The emergency door opened onto a narrow alley behind the building, the kind that exists in every old neighborhood in Madrid. Cobblestone, a single street lamp not yet lit in the gray afternoon, a few potted plants someone had put outside a window above. The door clanged shut behind me with a sound that was, I felt, entirely appropriate to the situation. I stood in the alley. My face was approximately the temperature of the sun. I had spent 20 minutes, 20 detailed, enthusiastic, fully committed minutes, explaining bookstore organization theory to a woman who had no professional stake in the matter whatsoever. I had asked her questions about staff policy. I had complimented her on her helpfulness. I had said at one point, and this is the part I will be taking to my grave. You clearly really love this store. She had said, I do find it quite special, which was technically true. She was waiting for her girlfriend in a bookstore she liked. That is not a lie. That is just a person being absolutely diabolical about the truth. I pressed the spine of the green book against my forehead and breathed. The alley smelled like old stone and someone's upstairs neighbor cooking something with garlic. A pigeon was doing something purposeful near a drain pipe. Madrid pigeons have always struck me as more confident than Seville pigeons. They walk like they have meetings to get to. The emergency door opened again. I turned around. Isolde was standing in the doorway, one hand still on the door to keep it open, backlit by the warm light of the bookstore interior. She had the look of someone who has made a decision and is standing firmly behind it, even as they acknowledge it might be complicated. Before you say anything, she started. I'm not going to say anything, I said. I'm just going to stand here and expire quietly. That seems excessive. I told you to rearrange the shelves. You suggested it. There's a difference. I said the romance section made no logical sense. It doesn't, actually. You were right about that. I looked at her. She looked back at me. There was a pause in which the pigeon near the drainpipe did something decisive and flew away. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. At the beginning, why didn't you just tell me you didn't work there? She was quiet for a moment, leaning slightly against the doorframe, the expression on her face one I was beginning to recognize. That careful, considered quality, like she actually thought about things before she said them, which I found both admirable and, currently, slightly maddening. Because you were so certain, she said finally. Not in an arrogant way, in a way that was kind of wonderful, actually. You walked up to me like you'd already decided I was worth talking to, and I didn't want to disappoint that. I stared at her. That is either the most flattering or the most alarming thing anyone has ever said to me. I know. A small pause. I'm sorry, genuinely. I didn't mean to make you feel foolish. And yet. She looked down briefly, then back up. For what it's worth, that was the most interesting conversation I've had in months. The Austen shelf was a highlight. I laughed despite myself, a short, incredulous sound. You're impossible. I've been told. She let the door ease partially closed, stepping slightly into the alley. The light shifted, and I could see her face more clearly now without the backlit warmth. The tiredness she wore somewhere underneath the composure. The way she held herself carefully. Like someone who had learned that being contained was safer than being open. I'm Isolde, she said, in case that's helpful now. Carlotta, I said. From Seville. I know. You told me about the April fair. A pause. It sounded beautiful. I looked at her standing in the narrow alley in Madrid on a gray Friday afternoon, holding a book under her arm and looking at me like I was something she hadn't expected to find today. And something in me, the part that was still deeply mortified, still processing the staff member in the blue apron, still replaying every single thing I'd said with increasing horror, that part went very quiet. You said you were waiting for your girlfriend, I said, because I am, if nothing else, someone who processes things out loud. She texted, Isolde said. She's not coming. That happens sometimes. She said it without drama, without self-pity, in the flat tone of someone describing a fact they've made their peace with. But there was something in the sentence that sat heavier than its words, and I had enough Sevillana instinct to know not to push at it. Well, I said instead. I was going to get coffee. If a person who just led me on for 20 minutes in a bookstore wanted to come, I wouldn't throw them out. Isolde looked at me for a long moment. Then she stepped fully into the alley, letting the emergency door close behind her. "Do you always forgive people this quickly?" she asked. "I haven't forgiven you yet," I said. "I'm buying myself time with caffeine." This time she smiled, fully, completely, the whole smile. And it was, I thought, worth every second of the mortification that had preceded it. We found a small cafe 2 streets over, the kind that has existed in Madrid since before either of us was born, and intends to continue existing long after. Dark wood tables, tiles on the floor in a faded geometric pattern, a bartender who greeted Isolde by name and didn't seem surprised to see her arrive with someone new. "You come here often?" I asked, sliding into the chair across from her. "I live nearby," she said. "I come here when I want to be somewhere that doesn't ask anything of me." It was such an honest answer that it surprised me into silence for a moment. We ordered coffee, a cortado for her, a café con leche for me, and a plate of sobaos that the bartender brought over without being asked, because, he explained, Friday afternoons required them. I agreed completely. Isolde looked at the pastries with the expression of someone who'd been trying to be disciplined and had just been granted permission to stop. The cafe hummed around us. Someone at the bar was reading a newspaper, actual paper folded in half. The coffee machine produced its sounds in a rhythm that felt like punctuation. Outside, the Madrid afternoon had turned the specific shade of golden gray that only happens in autumn when the clouds are thin enough to let the light through sideways. "Tell me something true," I said, because it was that kind of afternoon. Isolde looked up. "About what?" "Anything? You spent 20 minutes pretending to be someone you weren't. I think you owe me at least one true thing." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup and considered the table for a moment. Then she said, "I moved to Madrid 8 months ago because I thought it was what my relationship needed. She's from here. I thought if I was here, it would fix something, or at least stop the slow erosion." I waited. "It didn't," she said. "It just moved the erosion to a different city." "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be. It was my choice. I made it with my eyes open." She looked up. "That's what I tell myself anyway." The honesty in her voice was the particular kind that costs something to say. Not dramatic, not performed, just plain and clear and slightly exhausted. I recognized it because I had said things in that tone myself, late at night, to people I trusted, when I'd run out of energy for anything but the truth. "And today?" I asked. "She wasn't coming. That's happened before?" "Increasingly often," Isolde said. "She texts, something comes up. I've stopped being surprised." A pause. "I've started bringing books." I thought about her in the aisle, perfectly still, reading with her whole body. The way she hadn't looked at her phone once in 20 minutes of conversation. The way she'd been present, in a way that people who are happy usually aren't, because happiness is distracting. But loneliness makes you pay attention. "The bookstore was good today," I said. She looked at me. "Yes," she said. "It really was." We stayed in that cafe for 2 hours. We talked about Barcelona, where she'd grown up, the specific quality of light on the sea from the Barceloneta that she missed in a way she hadn't expected. We talked about Seville, and I told her about my family, my mother, who reads your future in the way you fold a napkin, my father, who communicates primarily in football and jamon, and has somehow managed to convey enormous love through both. I told her about the job I'd quit 6 months ago, the graphic design studio where I'd been good at the work and miserable at the existence, and the terrifying Tuesday morning I'd handed in my notice without a plan, only the absolute certainty that the plan I had was wrong. "What are you doing now?" she asked. "Freelance," I said. It's chaotic and occasionally terrifying, and I love it. You seem like someone who does well with chaos. I prefer to think of it as enthusiasm, I said. Is that what you call walking up to strangers in bookstores? I call that initiative. She laughed, a real laugh, warm and sudden, like something she hadn't been expecting to do today. The bartender glanced over from behind the counter with the expression of someone pleased to hear it. I found out, in those 2 hours, that Isolde was an architect, that she designed small public spaces, plazas, reading areas, the corners of parks where people gathered without being told to, that she thought deeply about how physical space shapes emotion, about what it means to make somewhere that people want to stay in, that she had been working on a project in Madrid for a year, and that the project was going well, and that she was therefore in the strange position of being professionally successful and personally adrift in the same city at the same time. Is that why you come to the bookstore? I asked. Because someone designed it to make people want to stay? She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite name. I'd never thought about it that way, she said, but probably yes. You should, I said. You designed that space for yourself without knowing it. The narrow aisles, the warm light, the cat. The cat is not a design choice. The cat is just a cat. The cat is absolutely a design choice, I said. Every great public space has a cat. This is a fact. She shook her head, but she was smiling. That full smile again. The one that had cost me 20 minutes of mortification to earn the first time. I was starting to understand it a little better. It wasn't that she didn't smile easily. It was that she'd learned to keep it in reserve, to give it only when something had genuinely earned it. Which meant that every time she gave it, it meant something. I looked at the time and felt the specific dismay of someone who has forgotten, for a while, to check the clock, and then finds that the afternoon has quietly become evening. I should probably get back to my hotel, I said. I have a reservation for dinner at 8. Alone? Obviously alone. I came to Madrid alone. I've been explaining this. Right. She looked down at her coffee, which had been empty for 45 minutes. Where are you going? I told her. She nodded slowly, and then, in the careful tone of someone making a decision that matters, I know a better place, if you're interested. I looked at her across the table. This woman I had met 2 hours ago in the most ridiculous way imaginable, who had made me laugh and made me think and sat across from me in a cafe in Madrid, telling me true things in the flat, honest voice of someone who didn't do that often. Okay, I said. Show me. The restaurant she took me to was in a courtyard off a side street in La Latina, the kind of place with no sign outside, and tables made of old doors set on sawhorses, covered in white paper and candles. The kind of place you only know about if you live somewhere long enough to love it. The owner kissed Isolde on both cheeks and seated us near the small fountain in the center of the courtyard, which was surrounded by potted herbs and one olive tree that had clearly been there longer than the restaurant. The evening had turned cool in the way Madrid evenings do in autumn. Not cold, just present, the kind of temperature that makes you lean forward over the table and speak a little more quietly. We shared patatas bravas and croquetas de jamón and a carafe of house wine that was unpretentious and perfect. We talked more. Different things, deeper things. She told me about her father, who had died 2 years ago, and the way she'd thrown herself into work in the months after, in a way that felt like building something against the dark. I told her about the relationship I'd ended the year before, and how the hardest part wasn't the ending, but the months before it, when you know something is over and haven't said it yet, and you have to live inside that knowing. That's the worst kind of quiet, she said. Yes, I said. Exactly that. The fountain made its small sound beside us. The candle between us threw light that moved when the breeze moved. Somewhere in the courtyard, someone was laughing at another table. The generous, unself-conscious laugh of people who have been friends for a long time. "Can I ask you something?" Isolde said. "After today, you can ask me anything." "Why did you forgive me so quickly? In the alley. You were embarrassed, genuinely embarrassed, which you had every right to be. And then 30 seconds later, you were inviting me for coffee." She looked at me carefully. Most people wouldn't have done that. I thought about it. The honest answer, not the easy one. "Because you followed me," I said. "You didn't have to. You could have stayed inside, let me leave, called it a funny thing that happened on a Friday. But you came through the door." I paused. People show you who they are in the small moments, the ones that don't cost them anything not to make. She was quiet for a long time after that. Not uncomfortable quiet, but thinking quiet. The kind of silence that means someone is sitting with what you said, rather than just waiting for it to finish. "I came because I didn't want it to end the way it was ending," she said finally. "I've had a lot of things end badly this year. I wanted just once to choose differently." I looked at her. This woman who designed spaces for people to stay in and had spent 8 months in a city that didn't quite fit, waiting in bookstores for someone who texted apologies, reading with her whole body still, keeping her full smile in reserve, who had decided, on a Friday afternoon, to be someone different for 20 minutes and had ended up being more herself than she'd planned. "For the record," I said, "your organization theory was terrible. Alphabetical by author is an act of violence against the reader experience." She laughed so suddenly she nearly knocked over her wine. "I said you might have a point. I was being diplomatic." "Architects," I said, "always diplomatic." "Writers," she said, "always dramatic." "I'm a graphic designer." "You're a storyteller," she said. "It's different." I looked at her. "That's the nicest thing anyone has called me in a long time." "Well," she lifted her glass slightly, "consider it a partial apology for the bookstore." We clinked glasses. The olive tree moved slightly in the evening breeze. The fountain kept its rhythm. The candle between us stayed lit. Before I left Madrid on Sunday morning, we walked along the Manzanares in the early light, coffees in hand, not talking much, the kind of comfortable silence that usually takes months to earn and occasionally, inexplicably, arrives fully formed in 2 days. She was moving back to Barcelona at the end of the month, she'd told me the night before. The project was ending. The relationship was ending, if she was honest. Had already ended, really, in everything but name. She was going home. "Seville is 4 hours from Barcelona by AV, I said, looking at the river. "I know," she said. "I'm just noting it, as a geographic fact. A very specific geographic fact. I'm a precise person." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I've never been to the April Fair." "I know," I said. "You told me." She turned to look at me, and there was something in her expression that was new, open, uncertain, and braver than anything she'd shown me yet. "Would you—" she started, and then stopped. "Yes," I said. She blinked. I didn't finish the question. "You didn't need to." She looked at me for a long moment, that careful, considering look. And then slowly she smiled. The full one. The one that meant something. We stood by the river in the early Madrid morning while the city woke up around us, and I thought about how the most significant things in a life so rarely arrive through the doors you expected them to use. How sometimes they come through the emergency exit. How sometimes they arrive looking like a mistake, and turn out to be the most important thing that happened to you all year. How sometimes you walk into a bookstore in a city that isn't yours, so confident you're right about everything, and find out you were wrong about all the small things, and completely, entirely right about the one thing that mattered. She didn't work there, but she followed me out anyway. And that, it turns out, was exactly enough. To whoever listened all the way to the end, thank you. Truly. It means everything. If this story moved you, made you smile, or made you think of someone, subscribe to the channel. There's always another story waiting, and I'd love for you to be here when it arrives. See you in the next one.